While I was fighting for my life in intensive care, my family was basking in Hawaii, spending my last savings. So I decided to take action. When they returned, they found something near the house that made them call me 73 times. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My eyes snapped open to blinding white light. Panic hit first. Where was I? Sharp tubes scraped my throat. Wires clung to my chest like spider webs. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it belonged to someone else. The room spun. Machines beeped frantically around me. This wasn't my bedroom in the mountains. This was sterile, cold, wrong. I reached for my throat, desperate to remove whatever was choking me, but my arms barely responded. Help, I tried to say, but only a wheeze escaped. Footsteps rushed toward me. A woman in scrubs appeared at my bedside, her face calm but alert. Behind her, more medical staff crowded into the small space. Mr. Warren, you're safe, she said, her voice steady. I'm Dr. Green. Please don't try to remove the oxygen tube. Safe? I wasn't safe. I was trapped in this mechanical nightmare, and I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here. Where am I? What happened to me? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Mr. Warren, you're in the hospital. You had a heart attack 10 days ago. Please stay calm. The worst is behind you. 10 days. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. 10 days of my life gone. I stared at Dr. Green, searching her face for lies, but found only professional concern. 10 days? Where is my son Dennis? Why isn't he here? Dr. Green's expression shifted slightly. Something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe discomfort. Regarding your family. I haven't seen them in recent days. Right now, it's important that you rest. Rest? How could I rest when my son wasn't here? Dennis lived just 20 minutes away. Even if work kept him busy, surely he'd visit his father in the ICU. Unless something had happened to him, too. The machines around my bed continued their electronic symphony. Through the window, I could see snow-capped peaks in the distance. The familiar silhouette of the Colorado Rockies. At least I was still in Evergreen. Dr. Green checked the monitors, making notes on a tablet. Her movements were efficient, practiced. How many patients like me had she seen? How many confused old men waking up from medical nightmares? Your heart rhythm is strong, she said, looking back at me. Your body went through significant trauma, but you're responding well to treatment. I tried to process this information. A heart attack. At 67, I'd always prided myself on my health. 40 years in the mines had kept me strong, and retirement hadn't slowed me down much. But apparently my body had other plans. I need to call Dennis, I said. Your personal effects are in the hospital safe. Once you're a bit stronger, we can arrange for you to use your phone. Personal effects. Like I was already dead. The thought chilled me more than the hospital air conditioning. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical tests and careful monitoring. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, adjusting medications. Each time someone entered the room, I hoped it might be Dennis. Each time, disappointment settled deeper in my chest. By afternoon, the initial panic had faded, replaced by a different kind of anxiety. Where was my family? Dr. Green's evasive answer troubled me. In all my years, Dennis had never been the type to abandon responsibility. Even as a kid, he'd been reliable, dutiful. Maybe he didn't know about the heart attack. Maybe the hospital hadn't been able to reach him. That had to be it. I watched the mountain shadows lengthen through my window as evening approached. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I'd insist on getting my phone back. I'd call Dennis myself, clear up this misunderstanding. The nursing staff prepared me for sleep, dimming the lights and reducing the constant chatter of medical equipment. But sleep felt impossible. 10 days. I'd lost 10 days of my life, and my son was nowhere to be found. Something wasn't right. 5 days had transformed me from an invalid into something resembling a human being again. I could sit up without the world spinning. My voice had returned to its normal, gravelly tone, instead of the whispered rasp that had embarrassed me earlier. Dr. Green entered for her afternoon rounds, tablet in hand, wearing the same professional smile that had greeted me every day since I'd awakened. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Warren?" "Much better," I said, and meant it. The fog in my brain had lifted. My hands were steady. Even my appetite had returned, though hospital food left much to be desired. She went through her routine examination D, checking my pulse, listening to my heart, reviewing the monitors that had become my constant companions. Her expressions remained neutral, but I'd learned to read the subtle signs of satisfaction in her movements. Your indicators have improved significantly, Mr. Warren. Your heart is recovering well. I think we can discharge you in 2 or 3 days. Relief flooded through me. Home, my own bed, my own kitchen, my familiar surroundings in the mountain house I'd shared with Martha for 35 years. That's wonderful news, Doctor. What about my phone? I need to contact my son. Here it is. The nurse brought it from your personal effects. You can use it now, but don't overexert yourself. She handed me the device D, a simple smartphone that Dennis had insisted I get last Christmas. At the time, I'd grumbled about unnecessary technology, but now it felt like a lifeline to the world I'd been cut off from for 15 days. The screen lit up at my touch. Battery at 12%, but functional. The notification icons showed missed calls and messages, but I didn't want to check them in front of Dr. Green. This conversation with Dennis needed to be private. Thank you, I said, clutching the phone carefully. You've taken excellent care of me. That's what we're here for. Your recovery has been remarkable for someone your age. Keep taking your medications as prescribed. Follow up with your cardiologist next week and avoid any strenuous activity. She made a few more notes, then gathered her materials to leave. Dr. Green, I called as she reached the door. Has anyone called about me? Asked about my condition? Her pause lasted just long enough to confirm what I'd suspected. Hospital policy requires us to contact emergency contacts, but we respect patient privacy regarding visitor information. Diplomatic non-answer, professional deflection, but her meaning was clear enough. After she left, I stared at the phone in my hands. 15 days without speaking to my son. In all his 38 years, we'd never gone that long without contact. Even when he'd moved to Denver for college, he'd called every weekend. The weight of the phone seemed to increase as afternoon faded toward evening. Part of me wanted to dial immediately, to hear Dennis's voice and end this mystery. But another part hesitated, afraid of what I might learn. Through my window, the mountains caught the last rays of sunlight, painting the peaks in shades of gold and pink. Soon visiting hours would begin. Maybe Dennis would surprise me, walking through that door with an explanation for his absence. Hours passed, no visitors came. By evening, I'd made my decision. I'd waited long enough. Whatever had kept Dennis away, we'd work through it together. That's what families did. I settled back into my pillows, phone charged and ready. Tonight, after the hospital quieted down, I'd call my son. The hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Hallway lights dimmed to a soft glow. Nursing stations buzzed with quiet activity. I'd been rehearsing this conversation for hours, imagining Dennis's relief at hearing my voice, his explanations for the long absence. My hands trembled slightly as I selected his number from my contacts. 15 days, the longest we'd ever gone without speaking. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, his familiar voice answered, "Dad?" Joy flooded through me at that single word. He was safe, alive, available. "Dennis, finally!" "Where are you, son? I haven't had contact with you for 15 days. Why didn't you visit the hospital?" My excitement made the words tumble together. I wanted to tell him everything, the fear, the confusion, the medical staff who'd taken such good care of me. "Listen, Dad, I can't talk long right now. Pris and I are in Hawaii. I took some money from your stash in the basement for tickets. You understand, we needed a vacation." The words hit me like physical blows. Hawaii. Vacation. My money. What? Hawaii? 15 days ago I was dying in the ICU and you were flying off on vacation. Background sounds filtered through the phone connection. De-ocean waves, distant music, the carefree atmosphere of a tropical resort. While I'd been fighting for my life, attached to machines, wondering if I'd survive another day. "Don't be so dramatic, Dad. You can see you're alive. Listen, international calls are expensive here. We'll talk when we get back in a week." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. The cheerful sounds of Hawaii still echoed in my memory, D-waves lapping against beaches while I'd struggled to breathe through tubes. My money. He'd stolen my money. The emergency fund I'd kept in the basement, saved from decades of mine work, set aside for real emergencies, medical bills, home repairs, end-of-life expenses, money I'd planned to leave him someday when I no longer needed it. He'd taken it for a vacation, while his father lay unconscious in intensive care. The phone trembled in my grip. 15 days of wondering where he was, if something terrible had happened to him. 15 days of nurses asking about family, doctors making gentle inquiries about visitors, the embarrassment of being the patient nobody came to see. All while Dennis sipped tropical drinks, and his wife posted Instagram photos from paradise. My heart monitor began beeping faster, responding to the surge of emotions I couldn't control. Betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd endured. This wasn't the son I'd raised, the boy who'd helped me through Martha's cancer, who'd called every weekend from college. This was a stranger who'd stolen from his dying father. The mountains outside my window looked different now, darker, more forbidding. The familiar peaks that had comforted me for 67 years now seemed like prison walls, trapping me with this horrible knowledge. Dennis would return in a week, expecting everything to be normal, expecting his father to understand, to forgive, to pretend that 15 days of abandonment during a medical emergency was acceptable behavior. But something had changed in me during that phone call. Something fundamental had shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the mountains. I wasn't the same man who'd collapsed with a heart attack 15 days ago. The dial tone droned in my ear long after Dennis had hung up. I held the phone against my chest, feeling my heart pound against the plastic case. The machines around me continued their electronic symphony, but everything else had gone silent. 15 days. 15 days I fought for my life, and he didn't even call to find out if I was alive. Instead, he went into my stash and flew off to have fun. I set the phone on the bedside table with shaking hands. The hospital room felt smaller now, the walls pressing closer. Through the window, Evergreen's mountain peaks stood like silent sentinels against the star-filled sky. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard ocean waves in the background of Dennis's voice, casual, dismissive, like talking to an inconvenience, rather than the father who'd raised him alone after Martha died. The night stretched endlessly. Nurses made their rounds, checking monitors, adjusting IV drips. I pretended to sleep, but my mind was racing through 30 years of memories. 30 years I've been pulling him out of trouble. When he got fired from the auto dealership, I paid 3 months of his mortgage. When he drank away his Christmas bonus, I gave him money for utilities so Pris wouldn't leave him. Every crisis, every mistake, every poor decision, I'd enabled it all. The pattern was so clear now. Dennis would call with a sob story, I'd write a check, and he'd disappear until the next crisis. Martha used to warn me about it before she passed. "You're making him weak, Percy," she'd say. "A man needs to face consequences." But I hadn't listened. I'd kept rescuing him, kept believing he'd eventually grow up and become responsible. Now I understood the truth. He saw me as an ATM, a backup plan, someone who'd always be there to clean up his messes while he lived his carefree life. Well, no more. The anger built slowly through the night, transforming from hurt into something colder, more calculating. By the time dawn light began filtering through the mountain peaks, I'd made my decision. No, enough being a fool. If he wants to play adult games, he'll get adult consequences. A nurse entered for the morning shift change, checking my vital signs with practiced efficiency. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Warren?" "Ready to go home," I said, and I was. Not to the same home Dennis expected to find when he returned from his stolen vacation. Not to the same father who'd always been there to bail him out. I was ready to teach my son what real consequences looked like. Dr. Green's final examination confirmed what I already knew. My body had healed enough to function outside these sterile walls. The discharge paperwork felt symbolic as I signed each page with steady hands. "Remember, Mr. Warren, no strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Take your medications exactly as prescribed, and call immediately if you experience chest pain or shortness of breath." I nodded, pocketing the pill bottles and instruction sheets. My few personal belongings fit in a small bag. Wallet, phone, the clothes I'd worn 17 days ago when the ambulance brought me here. The taxi ride through Evergreen's familiar streets felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same, but I was seeing it through different eyes. The mountains, the pine forests, the small town charm. It all belonged to a life I'd lived before I understood what my own son thought of me. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the driveway of 2847 Maple Grove, the house I'd shared with Martha, where I'd raised Dennis, where I'd planned to spend my remaining years in peace. The key still worked. The front door swung open to silence. Inside, evidence of their hasty departure scattered throughout the rooms, dirty dishes in the sink, Pris's makeup scattered across the bathroom counter, Dennis's work clothes draped over the bedroom chair. They'd left in a hurry, eager to catch their flight to paradise. The basement stairs creaked under my weight as I descended to check the damage. Behind the water heater, where I'd kept my emergency fund for 15 years, the loose floorboard had been pried up carelessly. The metal box that had contained $8,000 in cash lay empty, tossed aside like garbage. $8,000. My backup plan for medical emergencies, home repairs, funeral expenses, gone. But as I stood in that violated basement, something unexpected happened. Instead of despair, I felt relief, clarity. For 30 years, I'd wondered if I was being too harsh in my judgments of Dennis. Maybe he really was trying. Maybe the failures weren't entirely his fault. Maybe I expected too much. Now I knew better. I climbed back upstairs and found Tom Reed's business card in the kitchen drawer. Tom had handled the paperwork when Martha and I bought this house 30 years ago. He'd built a solid reputation in Evergreen's real estate market. My fingers were steady as I dialed his number. Reed Realty, Tom speaking. Tom, this is Percy Warren. I need to urgently sell the house on Maple Grove as quickly as possible. A pause. Percy, you just got out of the hospital. Maybe you should rest first. Think everything through. No, Tom. I need investor buyers. Cash. Maximum speed deal. Do you have such clients? Well, yes. There are several. But this is a serious decision, Percy. Are you sure? More than sure. Can we start tomorrow? Another pause. Tom's professional instincts were warring with his concern for my health. If you're certain, yes, I have 3 investors who might be interested. Properties in your neighborhood have been selling well. But Percy, this is your family home. Have you discussed this with Dennis? Dennis is traveling. I'm handling this myself. All right then. I'll make some calls tonight. Set up showings for early next week. You'll need to have the place looking its best. After I hung up, I sat in Martha's old chair and looked around our living room. By the time Dennis returned from Hawaii, this house would belong to someone else. His childhood home, his inheritance, his safety net. Gone. Just like my $8,000. Just like 15 days of my life while I fought to survive. Some lessons I realized could only be learned the hard way. The alarm clock's harsh buzz pulled me from restless sleep at 6 a.m. My first night back in my own bed had been fitful, interrupted by chest pain and the weight of what I'd set in motion. But when I sat up and looked around the bedroom I'd shared with Martha for decades, determination replaced discomfort. 4 days until Dennis returned. 3 days to prepare for Tom's investor showings. The phone rang as I finished my morning coffee. Percy, how are things going with the preparation? Tom's voice carried professional concern. I surveyed the living room with critical eyes. Dust on the mantelpiece, scuff marks on the hardwood floors, the general wear that accumulates when a house becomes just a place to eat and sleep rather than a home. Almost ready. When is the first showing? Tomorrow after lunch. Are you sure everything's ready? You sound tired. I was tired. The physical exertion of yesterday, cleaning, organizing, making the house presentable, had pushed my recovering heart harder than Dr. Green would approve. But time was running short. Everything's under control, Tom. The main thing is speed. After hanging up, I got to work. The living room came first. I moved furniture to vacuum underneath, wiped down every surface, touched up scuff marks with paint I found in the garage. My chest ached after 20 minutes, forcing me to rest on the couch until the discomfort passed. But I kept going. The kitchen required more effort. Years of bachelor cooking had left grease stains I'd stopped noticing. I scrubbed them away methodically, replaced the burned-out light bulb over the sink, tightened the loose handle on the cabinet door that had annoyed Martha for years. By noon, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and my hands shook from exertion. The shortness of breath worried me, but not enough to stop. The bathroom was next. I replaced the cracked tiles around the bathtub, grouted the loose ones, installed a new shower head. Simple repairs I'd been putting off for months became urgent necessities. Each task pushed my physical limits a little further. Each completed repair brought satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. This wasn't just house preparation, this was erasure. I was systematically removing every trace of the life Dennis expected to inherit. Every improvement made the house more attractive to buyers, more likely to sell quickly for cash. The afternoon brought a call from Tom with updates on interested investors. 3 solid prospects, all cash buyers looking for rental properties in Evergreen's growing market. "The first showing is set for 2 p.m. tomorrow," he said. "You've done good work, Percy. The house shows well." By evening, my entire body ached, but the transformation was remarkable. The house looked better than it had in years, clean, repaired, ready for new owners. I sat in Martha's chair with a glass of water and my evening medications, surveying what might be my last night in this house. Tomorrow, if things went well, I'd accept an offer. By the weekend, Dennis would return from Hawaii to find his inheritance sold. The thought should have brought regret. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. Some bridges needed to be burned completely. Tom's sedan pulled into my driveway at exactly 2 o'clock, followed by a sleek BMW with Colorado plates. Through my kitchen window, I watched a woman in an expensive suit emerge from the passenger seat. Polished, professional, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly pension. My stomach tightened. Everything depended on the next hour. "Percy, meet Sarah Collins," Tom said as I opened the front door. "She specializes in residential investment properties throughout the Front Range." Sarah's handshake was firm, businesslike. Her eyes immediately began cataloging details. The fresh paint on the porch railing, the new welcome mat, the gleaming front windows I'd spent yesterday morning cleaning. "Lovely location," she said, though her tone suggested she was already calculating rental income potential rather than appreciating the mountain views. The tour began in the living room. I'd arranged the furniture to maximize space, removed family photos that might make the house feel too personal for an investor's vision. Sarah took notes on her tablet, measuring rooms with a laser device, checking the condition of hardwood floors I'd spent 2 days refinishing. "Original oak throughout," Tom highlighted. "Percy's maintained this place beautifully." Sarah nodded absently, running her finger along the windowsills I'd scrubbed clean, testing the ceiling fan I'd repaired, opening and closing the closet doors I'd rehung properly. Everything I'd pushed my recovering body to accomplish over the past 3 days. In the kitchen, she examined the updated fixtures, the new backsplash tiles I'd installed despite the chest pain, the spotless appliances. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "The bones are solid," she admitted, checking the water pressure at the sink, "but the market's been challenging lately." My heart rate increased, though whether from anxiety or physical exertion I couldn't tell. The basement inspection worried me most. This was where Dennis had ransacked my savings, where evidence of his betrayal lived in the torn-up floorboards I'd repaired. But Sarah simply noted the furnace condition, the electrical panel upgrades, the dry foundation walls. Back upstairs, she settled into Martha's chair, my thinking chair, and opened her portfolio. "The house is in decent condition, but your price doesn't match the current market. I can offer 40% less." The number hit like a physical blow. 40%. That wasn't negotiation. That was insulting. "That's too low for such a house." Sarah shrugged, closing her portfolio with a snap. "Then look for another buyer. Good luck." She was standing, shaking Tom's hand, walking toward her BMW before I could fully process the rejection. Professional, efficient, completely indifferent to the desperation she'd probably sensed but chose to exploit. Tom lingered after her departure, his face creased with concern. "Percy, don't be discouraged. This is normal for the first showing. Tomorrow we'll try with another client." Tomorrow. Dennis would return tomorrow evening, expecting to find his childhood home waiting like a safety net he could continue abusing indefinitely. Instead, he'd find... what? A father who'd failed to even sell the house he'd threatened to sell? "Who's the next client?" I managed. "Robert Chen." Different type of investor, more reasonable, less predatory. He appreciates quality over quick profits. After Tom left, I sat in my thinking chair and stared at the mountain peaks, visible through windows I'd cleaned with my own hands. 40% less. The insult stung almost as much as the practical failure. But I wasn't done yet. The silence felt heavier after Tom's departure. I remained in Martha's chair, watching afternoon shadows stretch across floors I'd polished until my back screamed in protest. 40%. The number kept echoing in my mind like a taunt. Dennis would return tomorrow evening. 24 hours to salvage a plan that had taken everything I had left. The house around me felt different now. Not like a home I was preparing to sell, but like a fortress under siege. Every improvement I'd made, every hour of painful labor, every compromise with my recovering heart's limitations, all rejected with casual indifference. But Sarah Collins had taught me something valuable. She'd shown me the difference between what I wanted and what the market would bear, between justice and revenge, between principle and practicality. The phone felt heavy in my hands as I dialed Tom's number. Tom, I need results tomorrow. I'm ready to lower the price by 20%. A pause. I could hear him recalculating, reassessing the property value in light of my newfound flexibility. That's much more realistic. I have an investor who's looking for exactly this type of property. He can pay cash. Cash. The magic word that made everything else negotiable. Cash is perfect. When can he look? Tomorrow morning. Percy, why such urgency? What happened? The question I'd been dreading. Tom was too smart, too experienced not to sense the desperation behind my sudden willingness to compromise. But some truths were too complicated, too personal for professional relationships. Personal reasons, Tom. Just trust me. Another pause. In the silence, I could hear him weighing his curiosity against his respect for client privacy. Professional discretion, 1. All right then. Robert Chen, 9 a.m. sharp. He's serious about expanding his rental portfolio in mountain communities. After hanging up, I walked through the house one more time, seeing it through different eyes now. Not as the family home where I'd raised Dennis, where Martha and I had built 30 years of memories. Not even as the inheritance Dennis assumed would always be waiting for his next crisis. I saw it as a commodity, a tool, something to be traded for the satisfaction of watching my son learn what consequences actually felt like. The kitchen where Martha had taught Dennis to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The living room where we'd watched him graduate high school on televised ceremonies during the pandemic. The basement where he'd hidden during thunderstorms as a boy, later returning as a man to steal from his unconscious father. Every room told the story of opportunities wasted, lessons unlearned, kindness transformed into weakness. Tomorrow morning, Robert Chen would walk through these rooms and see rental income potential, maintenance costs, return on investment, numbers on a spreadsheet instead of memories on every surface. By tomorrow evening, Dennis would return from his stolen vacation to find his safety net gone. No family home to mortgage for his next crisis. No elderly father to bail him out of his next poor decision, just consequences. I made myself a simple dinner and took my evening medications, trying to ignore the chest tightness that had nothing to do with my heart condition. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or complete failure. Either way, I'd know where I stood. Outside, the Colorado mountains stood silhouetted against a darkening sky, as permanent and immovable as the resolve that had replaced the weakness Dennis had counted on for 38 years. Sleep had been impossible. I'd spent the night alternating between Martha's chair and the kitchen window, watching for headlights that might signal Dennis's early return. Every sound, wind through pine trees, distant traffic, the house settling, made my pulse quicken. By dawn, exhaustion and anticipation had merged into a strange clarity. This was the day everything changed, one way or another. At 8:30, I positioned myself at the front window and watched Tom's sedan approach, followed by a modest Subaru with a ski rack, a practical mountain car for a practical investor. Robert Chen looked nothing like Sarah Collins, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket, carrying a worn leather briefcase instead of an expensive portfolio. When he shook my hand, his grip conveyed genuine interest rather than predatory calculation. "Beautiful property," he said, surveying the mountain views before we'd even entered the house. These elevations maintain value better than lower altitude communities. The tour proceeded differently from yesterday's clinical inspection. Robert asked questions about the neighborhood, the history of the house, winter maintenance requirements. He examined the same features Sarah had dismissed, but with appreciation for quality rather than focus on minimal investment. "You've maintained this place well," he observed, running his hand along the banister I'd sanded and stained. "Original craftsmanship like this is rare in newer developments." In the kitchen, he tested cabinet doors, checked the stove's functionality, examined the plumbing connections I'd tightened. His movements suggested someone who understood both construction and rental property management. "The layout works well for families," he noted. "Mountain communities need more quality rental options." The basement inspection went smoothly. Robert focused on mechanical systems, storage capacity, and structural soundness rather than searching for flaws to exploit in negotiations. Back in the living room, he settled onto the couch and opened his briefcase, not for documents, but for a calculator and measurement notebook filled with handwritten observations. "I like the house. Location is excellent. Condition is decent too. I can pay cash, but let's reduce the price another 10%. 10%. Reasonable. Fair even. Is this your final offer?" "Final. And I can close the deal by end of week." End of week. Dennis would return tonight to find his inheritance already sold, the paperwork in motion, his safety net legally dissolved. "Deal! Tom, prepare the documents." Robert's face brightened with genuine satisfaction, not the cold triumph of someone who'd exploited desperation, but the pleasure of a fair transaction that benefited everyone involved. "Excellent. Tomorrow we'll start the paperwork." The handshake felt like an ending and a beginning simultaneously. Tom beamed with professional relief, already making notes about title companies and closing schedules. After they left, I stood in the center of my living room, soon to be Robert Chen's rental property, and felt something I hadn't experienced since Dennis's phone call from Hawaii: complete satisfaction. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the deeper contentment of a plan executed successfully despite obstacles. I'd adapted when rigidity would have failed. I'd compromised when stubbornness would have cost everything. Most importantly, I'd proven, to myself as much as to Dennis, that this old man still had teeth when pushed too far. The afternoon stretched ahead like a gift. Hours to savor anticipation before the confrontation that would reshape our relationship permanently. Dennis would arrive, expecting the same weak father who'd always been there to clean up his messes. Instead, he'd find a stranger who'd learned the difference between kindness and foolishness. Tom's office smelled like fresh coffee and leather chairs, the scent of successful deals and satisfied clients. I arrived early, carrying a manila folder with my identification documents and banking information, ready to transform promises into legal reality. "All documents are ready. Tomorrow we'll sign the main agreement." Tom spread the preliminary papers across his polished desk, pointing to signature lines with professional precision. Each page represented another nail in Dennis's coffin of assumptions about inherited security. "Excellent. And I'll receive the cash immediately." "Yes, the buyer will bring a bank check." I signed each document with steady hands, my signature flowing as smoothly as it had 30 years ago when Martha and I first bought this house. Full circle, except this time I was choosing freedom over family obligation. The next 2 days blurred together in systematic preparation. Room by room, I packed Dennis and Pris's belongings with methodical efficiency. Their clothes, her makeup collection, his golf clubs, their shared photographs from happier times. Each box told the story of a life lived carelessly, assuming someone else would always clean up the mess. Designer clothes bought on credit. Expensive electronics purchased during financial crises I'd resolved with my checkbook. Wedding photos where they smiled like people who'd never faced real consequences. The physical work pushed my recovering heart to its limits, but emotional detachment kept me moving. These weren't family treasures anymore. They were just objects belonging to strangers who'd stolen from their dying father. By March 30th, I'd loaded my truck 3 times, transporting everything to Rocky Vault's storage facility on the industrial side of town. The place looked exactly right for this purpose: anonymous, efficient, forgettable. "I need a storage unit for a short term," I told the clerk. a bored young man who barely looked up from his computer screen. For how many months? For an indefinite period. I'll pay for a year in advance. Cash payments simplified everything. No credit checks, no references, minimal paperwork. Unit number 47 became the temporary home for Dennis's life, accessible with a key I'd hide under the doormat, as planned. Loading the final boxes into that sterile concrete space felt ceremonial. Childhood photos mixed with adult failures, Little League trophies next to unpaid credit card statements. The archaeology of a man who'd never learned to stand on his own. I locked unit number 47 and pocketed the key, knowing Dennis would find it eventually when desperation forced him to actually read my instructions. My own packing took less than an hour. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of Martha's jewelry, and my father's mining tools. Everything else could stay with the house. Let Robert Chen deal with furniture and appliances. The moving truck I'd rented sat loaded and ready outside the empty house. Tomorrow, after the final papers were signed, I'd drive to the small apartment I'd rented in Willow Creek, a place Dennis would never think to look, in a town where nobody knew our family history. Standing in the doorway of the house where I'd raised my son, I felt no sadness, only the satisfaction of a job well done and justice properly served. Some lessons required complete destruction of old patterns before new growth could begin. The morning felt different, crisp with possibility rather than heavy with obligation. I arrived at Tom's office carrying the keys to 2847 Maple Grove for the last time, ready to sign away 30 years of family history without a backward glance. Robert Chen sat across from me at the conference table, his cashier's check already prepared and waiting. The amount was exactly what we'd agreed, enough to secure my independence and prove my point without leaving me wealthy. That's it, Percy. The house is officially sold. Tom's ceremonial tone carried genuine satisfaction. He'd earned his commission through professional competence, helping a client achieve goals he didn't fully understand, but respected enough not to question. Thank you for everything, Tom. You helped tremendously. The gratitude was real. Without Tom's expertise and discretion, this plan would have remained just an angry old man's fantasy instead of executed justice. What will you do now? Where you move on? Tom's curiosity was natural, professional. In 30 years of knowing me, he'd probably never seen me make such a dramatic life change. I have a plan, don't worry. Mystery served my purposes better than explanation. The fewer people who knew my new address, the better Dennis would learn to accept permanent consequences. The bank visit took longer than expected, converting a large cashier's check into cash-raised eyebrows, and required additional identification. But by noon I walked out with enough bills to fund my new life comfortably. The house waited for me, completely empty except for the note I'd been composing mentally for days. I'd written and rewritten the words in my mind, crafting each sentence to deliver maximum impact while maintaining dignity. The kitchen table, Martha's favorite spot for serious conversations, seemed like the right place for my final communication with Dennis. I sat down with a legal pad and began writing in careful handwriting. Dennis, when you read this, the house has already been sold. Your belongings are in storage unit number 47 at Rocky Vaults. Key is under the doormat. Don't try to find me. It's pointless. For 30 years, I've been your safety net. Every financial crisis, every poor decision, every consequence you couldn't face alone. I was there with my checkbook and my patience. When you got fired, I paid your mortgage. When you drank away your bonus, I covered your utilities. When you needed vacation money, you helped yourself to my emergency fund while I lay unconscious in intensive care. 15 days I fought for my life in that hospital room. 15 days wondering if I would survive to see my family again. While I struggled to breathe through tubes and machines, you were sipping tropical drinks with money stolen from your dying father. You called me dramatic for objecting to your theft and abandonment. You hung up on me because international calls were expensive. You treated my near-death experience like an inconvenience to your vacation schedule. Now you'll understand what it means to have no safety net, no father to bail you out, no family home to mortgage for your next crisis. You're 38 years old. It's time you learned to face consequences like an adult. Don't contact me. Don't look for me. Don't expect reconciliation or forgiveness. This isn't cruelty, it's education. The School of Hard Knocks has officially opened, and tuition is everything you took for granted. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. I'm ashamed I enabled it for so long. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Dennis. It's never too late to become the man I hoped you'd be. I signed it simply, Percy Warren, and left it propped against the sugar bowl where Dennis would definitely see it. Walking through the empty rooms one final time, I felt only relief. No ghosts of family dinners or Christmas mornings haunted these bare walls. Just the echo of my footsteps moving toward a future built on self-respect instead of family obligation. The front door closed behind me with a satisfying click. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows woke me at dawn. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The ceiling was different. The sounds outside my bedroom were new. Then memory flooded back, bringing satisfaction instead of confusion. I was free. My new apartment in Willow Creek was modest but sufficient. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, mountain views from the living room window. Everything a 67-year-old man needed to live comfortably without the weight of family drama pressing down on his shoulders. Coffee tasted different here. Better, somehow. The simple pleasure of morning routine without wondering when the next crisis would arrive, when the next desperate phone call would interrupt my peace. At exactly 9:30, my phone began buzzing. The screen showed Dennis's name and number, followed immediately by another call, then another. I let them all go to voicemail, watching the missed call counter climb, with scientific fascination. By noon, the number had reached 73. 73 calls. I guess they finally understand what it means to be left with nothing. I scrolled through the call log, noting the timestamp progression. The first few calls came 20 minutes apart. Probably Dennis trying the house phone, then my cell, then calling back casually. By hour 2, the intervals shortened to 5 minutes. By hour 4, constant desperation. The voicemails painted a predictable picture without my needing to listen. I could imagine Dennis's voice progressing from confusion to anger to panic to pleading. Pris probably grabbing the phone to add her own brand of entitled outrage. None of it mattered anymore. Now they know how it feels to come home and find nothing. Like I found an empty hospital room while they were enjoying themselves with my money. Through my new living room window, the Colorado Rockies looked exactly the same as they had from my old house. Eternal, unchanging, indifferent to human drama. The mountains had watched Martha and me build our life together, witnessed Dennis grow from an innocent child into a selfish man, observed my transformation from enabler to educator. This isn't revenge, it's a lesson. A lesson about consequences and responsibility. My phone buzzed again. Call number 74. I turned it face down on the coffee table and returned to my morning newspaper, reading local Willow Creek news with genuine interest. The community center needed volunteers for senior activities. The library was hosting a book club focused on Western history. A hiking group met every Wednesday for mountain trail walks. Life was beginning again at 67, and it felt like the first honest life I'd lived in decades. The calls would stop eventually. Dennis would exhaust his panic, accept his situation, and start the difficult process of building adult resilience. Or he wouldn't, and he'd spend his remaining years blaming everyone except himself for his problems. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility. I'd spent 30 years trying to raise a man who refused to grow up. Now, finally, Dennis would face the choice every adult must make: learn to stand alone, or fall down and stay there. I hoped he'd choose to stand, but if he didn't, at least I'd know I'd done everything possible to teach him the difference between kindness and weakness. The mountain peaks caught the afternoon light, glowing gold against the blue Colorado sky. Beautiful, permanent, peaceful. Just like the satisfaction settling into my bones as I contemplated a future built on dignity instead of manipulation, respect instead of exploitation, chosen solitude instead of obligated rescue missions. Dennis had taught me an unexpected lesson through his betrayal. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to succeed or fail entirely on their own merit. At 67, I was finally ready to live for myself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.